For today's review, we are looking at the Mcfarlane Collector Edition Year 2 Batman. Now, before I dive into talking about the accessories and of course the figure, as usual, let's take a quick look at the data profile card that is included. And as you can see, there is this beautiful comic book artwork of the Year 2 Batman. There it is. And on the back, it reads, Batman Year 2. With only a year's experience as Gotham City's new protector, Batman must now confront a nightmare out of the past, a distorted reflection of himself called the Reaper, who hunted Gotham's criminals a generation earlier. His methods were harsh and cruel and violent in the extreme. Now, just as a new breed of criminal is rising, the Reaper has returned to deal out his savage brand of justice, and the only way for Batman to stop this death-dealing vigilante is to forge an alliance with the man who destroyed his life, his own parents' murderer. But can the Dark Knight stand to confront the secret of their deaths, or will the Reaper's revelations finally cost him his sanity? This sounds like a very interesting story, and I apologize to everyone because I've never read this story before. But if you have read the story and you want to provide context in the comments below to what happens in it, and also why this version of Batman has the weapons that he has, feel free to do so. And with that said, let's talk about the accessories that are included with this figure. And let's start with the interchangeable hands. Now, compared to Deadshot that we looked at last week, he doesn't come with much interchangeable hands. So as you can see, he does have the item holding hand on the right arm, which does have a little bit of the cell shading, and he can hold his hook blade weapon or his gun. And on this side, he has a gesture hand, as I like to call this, which is a similar sculpting to usually the hand gestures when a character is angry. So that's what that looks like. And as for the two other additional hands, he comes with another gesture hand for the right arm, and it also has the cell shading. And for the last interchangeable hand, he comes with a single fist hand. And I don't like when they do this, because if you're going to give this action figure one fist hand, you might as well give them both. As for his other accessories, he does come with his hook blade weapon, which is something that I never thought I would ever see Batman use, but there it is. Now, if you don't want this Batman to use this weapon, you could probably give this to other action figures from Mcfarlane that they've made, like your Mortal Kombat figures or your Batman Who Laugh action figures that you have. Like, they could probably rock this as well. So there's that option. And of course, the last accessory is his gun. Yeah, that is something that I'm surprised with, because Deadshot would have benefited with gun accessories, but instead he doesn't have any proper gun accessories, but this Batman has one for some reason. So there's that. And of course, the last thing that is in this box, which I never include as accessories, is of course the usual DC figure stand that they all come with. So there is that. And that's all you get in this box. Nothing else. So not a whole lot of accessories, which is not great. And if you're wondering what takes up the majority of this box, well, it's quite obvious what that is, and we'll talk about that later. So let's start with the aesthetics, and let's start with the cell shading element that is present on this figure. And I think the cell shading, again, it's not the best, and I'm not a fan when they do this, because cell shading can be done effectively if they put in more sort of effort into the paint to make it look like cell shading. But in this case, it doesn't really come off that way, and I don't like when they do stuff like this, because it just doesn't really work the way that it's supposed to. So, you know, areas like this, right, that are cell shaded, it just looks really sloppy. And then down here, you have these sort of lines that are painted in blue, but again, it just looks really strange, where it doesn't really shine brightly as cell shading as it does in a comic book artwork, where cell shading is better because, you know, the colors that they use for an artwork is not the same as how they paint these. So in this case, this detail, even if it wasn't on the figure, it would still be okay, like if this wasn't even here. So yeah, not a fan of the cell shading. And also, I do want to point this out. This is the Hush body mold, which we've seen many times, and as you can see right here with the pin, since we'll never get pinless DC figures from Mcfarlane Toys, they didn't even bother to paint that black. They could have painted this to match the arm color here with his gauntlets, but they left it this way, so it just looks really lazy. And I don't like when they do stuff like this, because this could easily just be painted. But again, this is not the first time they've made these sort of errors. As for his belt, I do like the details of it. It's not too bad. It is just a yellow belt, but there are some sculpt going on there. And now let's talk about the upper part of his body, which is his torso. As you can see, he does have a holster for his gun. And if you do not want him to hold his gun, you can simply store it in here. So there's that. And the holster is not removable because it's literally like underneath the cape, which is glued onto the figure. So if you wanted to remove this, you would have to literally do a lot of modifications to remove this holster here. So there's that problem. But there you go. You can store his gun into that. And his bat logo is being covered up by parts of the straps of the holster, but it is the same bat insignia that we've seen many times. And in terms of the cell shading details, you can see that it goes all the way up to his mask. You know, it's not like a bad thing, but again, if it was painted much better than just the way it's painted right now, the cell shading would not be a bad thing, right? And in terms of his face sculpt, I do like the way that it came out. It is expressing this sort of anger that he's feeling in whatever situation he's dealing with right now in this particular part of the story. But it would have been awesome if he came with some faceplates, because they've been doing the whole faceplate stuff for some DC figures, and I'm surprised that they haven't done any for Batman. So it would have been nice if we got some additional faceplates, or maybe an alternate head sculpt, right? Like, that would have been awesome if that were a thing. Now, one cool thing that they did with this Batman figure is that they did retool his neck. So usually the Hush body buck, the head sculpts for these are always connected to the neck, and then the articulation is all the way down there. But in this case, they opted to go with the usual sort of like neck articulation for the head that is present on most DC Multiverse figures. And I'm glad they retooled this, because I hate that whole like head connected to the neck sort of combo, and then it's only one articulation down there, because it doesn't allow for his head sculpt to move in any way. But in this case, with this retooling that they did, which is the first time I've seen this happen on this particular body buck, it makes the movement of his head better in terms of articulation than leaving it the way that it was. So I'm glad they did change that at least. And now let's talk about the very big presence of his cape that is pretty much what took up most of the box when it comes to the figure inside the packaging. And as you can see, this cape is large. Like, it's really expressive, right? And I don't know who drew this version of Batman in the comics. I'm assuming it's Todd McFarlane, because he's the only artist I've seen draw like giant capes like this. Now, there's probably many other artists. I'm just assuming it's Todd McFarlane. But it's very, exaggerated, right? Like, you can see how large the cape is with the windswept motion, and how these are like upward like this, which is really strange how they're just sitting upward. But the craziness of the sculpt here of this cape really does make this Batman stand out more than I thought it would. At first, when I saw this Batman in the initial product photos, I wasn't like crazy about it. But then when I finally saw what it looks like in store, and I saw the cape sculpt, I was like, man, I need this figure. And now I'm part of that problem again, right? I'm part of that problem where I keep buying more Batman figures, even if I already have plenty of them. And it's like, I'm just adding more to my collection. And it makes me want to do a Batman collection video, like, where I show off all the McFarlane Batmans that I have in my collection, because that would be a pretty cool video to do. So, and let's look at the back of the cape. And as you can see, there's that same sort of like crazy sculpt going on. Now, it would have been awesome if this cape was made out of cloth wire, because I think if it was a cloth wire cape, there would be so many more posability options with it, instead of just this plastic soft PVC that they used. So I don't know why they didn't opt for a cloth wire cape in this case. But in the end of the day, if they're going for a certain design element, this works. I don't hate it. I think it came out pretty good. And the overall sculpt of this Batman, even though most of the aesthetics are really simple, the cape really adds that element of adding a sort of nice presentation on the shelf. Let's just put it that way. And the last thing that I want to point out before we get into articulation is the fact that the colors are not completely accurate here. So when you look back at the artwork, his cape is blue on the outside and it's black on the inside. So I don't know why they changed the colors here to make it not match the source material. So it's really strange. But it's just something I just wanted to point out. Now let's talk about the articulation. So we've looked at a Batman before using this body buck, I think. I don't remember. It's been a while. So for his head articulation right here, he can look up, which is not too bad. He can look down, which is also not too bad. He can turn his head side to side. He can tilt his head side to side. So articulation with the head sculpt, pretty freaking good. As for his arms, they can go outward like that. He can swing them outward like this. He can swing them all the way back, no problems, because it doesn't really... Well, it does run into the cape a little bit, but it doesn't hinder the arms from swinging back and forth. As for his arms, he does have the double jointed articulation right there. He also has the upper bicep swivel on the top right here, and he has swivel in the hands and wrist articulation and swivel with the wrist joints. So there is that. As for his torso, it can rotate without any problems, as you can see. However, when it comes to leaning forward or leaning backward, it doesn't move. And this is one of those cases where if you want this torso up here to do anything, you're going to have to do modifications. And I did mention this in the last review, where sometimes these torso articulation here, they just rotate really good, but they don't move at all, like leaning forward or leaning back. So this is another example of what I mean, where sometimes they're really good articulation, but then sometimes they're just really bad. And this is one of those cases where it's not great. As for his waist, it does move, but it's really tight on my copy. So in this case, you want to heat this up with hot water or a hairdryer to loosen that. As for his legs, he does have upward thigh swivel. They do move on this copy of my Batman figure here, so that's not bad. I do like the fact that those are not frozen as usual. And for his legs spreading out, not a complete full split, but almost there. But still, that's pretty good when it comes to spreading out the legs. As for kicking, not that great. So he can't do a full-on kick, but he can still do some sort of kick in some ways. And of course, he does have the double jointed in the legs. And of course, he has the articulation in the feet and the swivel down here. And of course, the toe articulation. And that's pretty much all the articulation on this figure. It's pretty much just your standard Mcfarlane articulation with some flaws that are not great sometimes. And now, let me show some accessories on him. So I'm going to put the gun in the strap here because that's where it should go. And let's get this hook weapon onto his hand, which is really simple to do. All you just do is just do that. And that goes in. And now he is armed with his weapons. Pretty cool. Actually, let me just show it better. So, yeah, it's really strange, right? Like, this is one of those Batmans that I just don't really understand the context of why he has any of these weapons to begin with. But when you have them on him, he looks really cool. Like, I like the overall aesthetic of this when he has everything equipped. So, and also, the crazy thing about this is that even though this cape feels a little bit top heavy, he can still stand without any issues if you just pose him correctly, so he won't really fall over. Sometimes he will, but you know, in this case, I can get him to stand. So let's put him right here, because now let's bring in some other figures to do some comparisons with. And let's start with a Marvel Legends. So here he is, next to the Marvel Legends Extremis Suit Iron Man, and they're completely different in scale. Here he is next to the Jada Toys Street Fighter Chun-Li, also different in scale. And now let's have him next to some other DC Multiverse figures from Mcfarlane Toys. Here he is standing next to the Death Metal or Dark Metal or Dark Knight's Metal, I'm getting the names mixed up, Batman. So there are the two of them together. And yeah, you can see that they're not even from the same source material. But They got a little bit of that wackiness to them, as I like to call this. So there is that. And here he is next to the Silver Age Superman. Yeah, I don't think this Batman's meant to go with the Superman, but I mean, it's your shelf. If you want to do this sort of pairing, you can have that happen. And of course, last but not least, here he is next to his other wave mate from the same collector edition wave. Here he is next to Deadshot, and he does not want to stand right now, so I'm just going to hold him. But you can see that this Batman is a lot taller than Deadshot. So, yeah. And that's going to do for all the comparisons for today's review. And if you found today's review on this Year 2 Batman enjoyable, give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, you can. You don't have to. In the end of the day, I make these videos for fun. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.